So Steve Kerr, one of the greatest basketball three-point shooters of all time, he used to train himself to be a great shooter as a substitute. He'd sit on the bench, and then a shooting coach would just randomly say, hey, go in. He'd hop up, he'd be cold, and he'd run down the court and shoot a three and come back and sit down. And he did that because that's what his role entailed. And I love that intentionality that his shooting coach brought. How are we helping athletes in our training? How are we helping our athletes with our communication, our teaching, our instruction, our film sessions to be successful in their role as a substitute, as a reserve? There is a physical, there's a tactical, a technical, and a mental aspect of the substitute role that does not exist for those that are starters. And yet we seem to just coach them almost the exact same as we coach the starters. In the second installment of our conversation with Sammy Lander, a specialist subs coach and a founder of the Finishers Academy, we are going deep into the practical, psychological, and cultural dimensions of managing athletes who aren't in the starting lineup. Sammy's going to share some battle-tested strategies that he's used in English professional soccer teams or football teams. Strategies that are helping athletes, substitutes in particular, stay physically ready, emotionally grounded, and mentally connected to the game, even when they're sitting on the bench. From building authentic sideline cultures to simulating game scenarios and training, Sammy is going to make a very compelling case that substitutes deserve just as much, if not more, deliberate coaching attention than starters do. He also touches on how giving players a unique sub-identity, finisher, impactor, that can be transformational for team cohesion and individual confidence. Welcome back to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nerman, joined by my co-host, Nate Sanderson. The mission of this podcast is to help you become a better leader and build a better culture. To get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, go to tocculture.com and subscribe to the Team Culture Toolbox. You'll also get a weekly thought on leadership, culture, and coaching from me. Let's go right here with part 2 of my conversation with Sammy. Behaviors are more of a window into the person, and yet I think we try to prescribe behaviors. This is what a sideline should look like, and I've been guilty of that. What you want is probably like, I like what you said, there's authenticity. We want an authentic sideline. And so getting players reflect more on the values they want to demonstrate from that sideline is great. How do you get players to be authentically engaged on the sideline?
I suppose it comes back to that word process again. So I think the first thing is by having an understanding of what their role is going to look like that day or that game or that match week, which again comes from the word finishers and all the different names that we have for them. You know, that's already tactical direction and sort of alternative identities that they can resonate with. So that's the first step for players, I think, being authentic with me. The second thing is, I think it's hard to articulate this point, but there is just such a value in the substitutes having a point of contact that is not the manager, I think. And well, I know, but I mean, as in, I think that's why it's relevant having a coach that's sort of called the subs coach in a way. Do you know what I mean? Is because they know they can come to you. And I was talking about it yesterday on the coach education course I was on, is that my role, I don't like seeing my role as anything above the players. I like being on par with the players. And I think I'm a little bit younger. I'm only 28 now. So I think that plays in my favor, is that I'm the age of a lot of these players that are going through this. And I think that that understanding of how they see life and how I see life and what they want from life is, I find it very easy to relate to these people and to understand them. And I think it builds what I like to think is a genuine connection, which comes back to that sort of word authentic, is that like I genuinely have their best interests at heart when I'm maybe being a little bit harsh on them to follow this particular warm-up, to sit down with me and go through their clips as a sub when all the starters have gone home. You know, I have this genuine interest and this genuine passion. I want them to get back into the 11. And I think at start, I think players think I'm being a bit of a job's worth or a bit busy. I think after sort of 5 or 6 weeks, when I'm still there at 5 o'clock on a Friday saying, let's do something, I think then it sort of knocks down that barrier to go, well, I think this dude actually cares about whether I get minutes or not, which is like, it's weirdly quite selfless because I don't really benefit from it in a weird way. Do you know what I mean? It's not like if he gets minutes, I'm on some sort of like bonus of a minute per sub or anything. I genuinely meet so many cool characters in football that I think I want the best for you. And I think the best for you is getting you back into that 11. A good example I always use is goalkeeping coaches. They are one of probably the oldest specialist coach in football that I know of. And nobody, by the way, nobody looks at that and goes, God, you don't need one of those for only 4 people. But there is such value in, goalkeeping coaches training 4 people for one position and then managing the other 3. And I think that's a really impressive dynamic. They probably don't get the credit they deserve.
I think one of the interesting things about that as well, when you have a positional coach, is that there's a bit of identity that is baked into being a goalkeeper within the larger unit, right? And you obviously have that positionally in a lot of sports and on a lot of teams. But what I hear you describing here is almost there's a sub identity for the unit that you're working with as the subs, and maybe that's what that substitution union phrase refers to, and maybe you can unpack that a little bit for us. But what is it about, when I think back to I don't know, what there are famous examples in the NBA of teams that have had the bench mob. The Chicago Bulls, back when I was growing up, had this group of 5 guys that that was their identity, and they came in the second and third quarter and they just played with their hair on fire, and then they were out, right? So the starters could finish the game, but the whole city celebrated the bench mob, and people were wearing Taj Gibson jerseys, and he played 12 minutes a game. It was crazy. So how do you do something like that where it almost becomes this subculture that can kind of take off with a unique identity that can be so positive, but it seems so hard to accomplish sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't know about that. So that is epic. You're going to have to send me some links to that, because I'm going to have to read up on where this kid is who's getting 12 minutes and getting people wearing their jerseys, because he sounds like he's going to make my job a lot easier, as an example. But no, I mean, so another good example I'm not amazing at rugby and my rugby knowledge, but the bomb squad is really another good example that's sort of coming in, the way that the rugby teams are sort of changing the way they build their bench. I think it's the South Africans that do it. So there is definitely those examples out there. And what I find interesting is that, so that, you just gave a great example. You've got the bomb squad, you've got your Ole Gunnar Solskjaers, who everybody talks about as the super sub. What I find mad is that coaches don't look at that and go, well, I want that. I want to build that. It's almost maybe a priority thing. I don't know. It'd be good. I think maybe each coach's point is different. I also get the reason why I think subs is such a big thing at the moment is because in football anyways at the moment, obviously I don't know about your respective sports, but there is such a demand. It's a 7-day-a-week job. Your fixed schedule is insane. Your staff work already, a huge amount of hours. If you were then to go on and say, right, now we're going to add 2 hours, 3 hours a week onto everybody's role to then account for the players that we're maybe not accounting for, just makes everyone's job even harder, which is why if you centralize that for a coach, I think it makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, the identity is massive. I think the way that you identify with the names used around, so obviously finisher is the buzzword, and I think it's brilliant. Eddie Jones is done some amazing work that word is still existing and still is having an impact on players. What we do is sort of go one step further, where we then have different types of finishers. And I think that might sort of answer this question a little bit better, is that players then choose to resonate with those names. And that's what then brings it to life. That's then what they represent. That's then what they go on the pitch and become. But I think, bringing those words to life, having that identity amongst the bench is really important. And again, that can come from the players. We've just started doing workshops. I've just launched something called the Finishers Academy, which is now where we're working with sort of 14 to 18-year-olds that are in professional sports to build themselves a finisher's identity. And they pick the name, they pick what it means, they pick the definition, they pick the things that they want to judge themselves on, and this is all done in conjunction with the management team. So there's still alignment. But that is so powerful. And that you've got an 18-year-old coming to me going, I'm like, if I don't play, I'm an impactor. And it's almost just like, wow, in 10 years' time, you're going to be a manager's dream, because you're not going to be the guy that's, kicking your toys out of pram because you haven't got a starter. You're going to be obviously annoyed, as everyone would be. Being a sub isn't the best thing in the world, but you're going to process it so well, and you're going to rechannel that energy so well. And I take a lot of, I suppose, energy from those sorts of processes.
How have you worked with players when they've been dropped? That moment that they've been dropped from that starting lineup, to not lose that confidence, because what I've seen in my work with athletes is they feel like they need the starting spot to feel confident again.
Yeah, I think again, the person over the player here is massive. The confidence comes in loads of different ways, loads of different formats, and also in loads of different identities. Typically players need the minutes to feel good because they're a player. Whereas sometimes I would sit down with them and I'll just remind them that a player is just one of their many identities, that they are a father, that they are a wife, that they are a husband, that they are a son. They are loads of different things in life. They are a boxing fan as well. They are they are my mate. They're just loads of different things. And it's just about reminding them that they have confidence in so many other aspects of their life, that what this sort of sudden, I suppose, career transition or this hurt, it isn't summarizing of your whole life and your whole outlook and who you are. It's a tiny moment. Also, what we do is, like you said, is process that. You channel it. You go, I completely understand your frustrations. I'm not here to try and make you feel good about being a sub. I'm here to make you feel like you've got all of the tools necessary so that when that moment comes, you can do what you need to do to get back to where that feeling, of where you want to go. And, players all the time talk about how losing can make you appreciate winning more, and sometimes I have that conversation with players where I say, yeah, being a sub is rubbish, but how good are those minutes going to feel when the gaffer gives you that start in 3 weeks time, 2 weeks time, 4 weeks time, whatever it is.
Okay, a quick pause. If you're getting value from the conversation, I just want you to know about the TOC coach community. It's free to join, jump in, connect with some other coaches, start learning. Here's the thing though, if you're the kind of coach who wants to go deeper, who's really committed to transformation, not just doing enough to get by, Premium Access gives you everything, all 12 courses, every live training, my office hours that I host multiple times a week for 30 minutes where you can just pop in, ask me a question. You're going to get the personalized consulting for your team when you need it. You also get one of my favorite courses for coaches, which is the Playing Time System course. It's an incredible way to develop a systematic way within your team to determine, communicate, and support players in their role on your team. It eliminates playing time issues that create headaches and kill culture. It's for coaches who don't just want to be good, right? They want to be the kind of leader that their athletes look back and say, that was the best team experience I've ever been part of, regardless of their role on the team. Now, if that's you, go on over to tocculture.com where you can join the TOC coach community. We look forward to seeing you inside.
Are there any specific strategies, just pivoting for a moment here, when I think about starters getting ready for a game, we go through a full warm-up, they work up a lather, there's kind of this gradual buildup in terms of their energy, their focus, physical body obviously is getting prepared. They go out on the floor, they go out on the field, and they play right away in this, prime state. And everybody else goes and has a seat for the next, 10 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it might be. And then they're thrust into the same game. Like, are there just specific strategies that coaches can take away from to help those players that don't get to benefit from the immediate physical kind of warm up prior to the game to prepare themselves to come in, cold is typically the word that we describe. But even that word is like, man, how hard is that? Because we have no process. I never had a process, for a substitute coming in 6 minutes into the game, mentally, emotionally, or physically. So what tips can you give coaches for getting those players ready in game?
Great question. And you make a good point, is that so we've been here for almost 47 minutes on the dot. That's a first half. Okay. So let's just say, we're in a game, someone gets sent off. I don't know about you two, but I am in no position right now to hit my top speed. I'm in no position to jump the highest I've ever jumped. I'm in no position to go and challenge a 6'6" centre back who's going to throw some elbows and potentially, my action might decide whether we win or lose the game. But for some reason, it's weird, isn't it? Because we laugh about it and you go, yeah, it's absurd. But then every Saturday, this is the exact thing that people go through, isn't it? And you go, oh God, it's actually happening at the highest of levels of international football that I go in and talk to. They do it, and you go, that's meant to be like the pinnacle of the game. And these issues are still prevalent there. So there are loads of different things. So there's loads of different strategies. When I went into my last club, 19 different things is what we eventually implemented that they didn't have on offering already. I won't bore you with all 19, but I'll sort of touch on a couple that I think are probably the big ones. So the first is we have cue cards. So we have physical cue cards that will help players warm up. Now, in football, I always filmed the touchlines when players would go down to film their warm-ups. And again, stripping it right back to the basics of how I can get really, maybe more challenging players to buy into this role. Well, they're the ones that told me it's really tough coming on in a game of football that's so intense. So I'm using their issue to create a solution that's going to create a process. So now all of a sudden, it gets to the 15th minute and I've sat here for 15 minutes, 16 minutes. I go, right, I need to go and move. Here's a cue card. Sammy stuck them up on the back of the dugout. So I take mine. Sometimes I need it. Sometimes I don't. After a while, players know off by heart, know what I'm doing. Go 6 minutes, follow the actions, back in. And we're starting to build a routine now of doing that every 15 minutes throughout the game. Keeps you in an optimal state of at any given moment being, I'm not saying you're going to be the most ready, but you're being far more ready to what we call unlock your physical potential. If I sit down with someone who's been a sub and didn't enjoy it and didn't really sort of maybe buy in, and I say, well, for 40% of your game time, you wasted it. This is why we do what we do. Players immediately buy in because then they go, Jesus, we probably need to do that because, this is the results that Sammy's had in his previous clubs or his previous players or my mate who was a sub last week or whatever. So that's something big for the physical side of the game. The one other that I would always recommend, and I think to be done at any level of football, is halftime sessions. So we hold effectively a 15-minute session at halftime that runs through a whole series of unopposed, opposed, small-sided game, position-specific work to build and coach direct solutions into what we want to see in the second half. Yeah, being more deliberate with our warm-ups and being more deliberate with our half-times, I think are two really easy ways that if you're working even at like the bottom of football, you can do that. You don't need a budget, you don't need data, you don't really need extra coaches. They're just things that you can implement that will have an impact. And obviously the higher up you go, the more you can sort of, I suppose, implement it with a bit more resource, but things that are really easy to do in my opinion.
One of the things I think is really interesting there that you also mentioned in terms of the training is it's very purposeful and it's very connected to their role and is very connected to the game context, which we could do a whole nother podcast on how this is probably how all of our training should be, but maybe is not still the most common thing that you see in practices. But it reminded me of an anecdote I read in a book about shooting in basketball. And there was a chapter on Steve Kerr. Before he became a coach, he played for the Bulls and the Spurs and really extended his career in San Antonio and won a couple rings because he figured out how to come off the bench, quote unquote, cold and still be able to make open threes. And what he did with Chip Ellingard, who was his shooting coach, is when they would do their individual workouts, Chip came up with this idea. He said, Steve, I want you to bring the newspaper to our workout tomorrow. Steve's like, the hell are you talking about? So he comes to the workout. They sit on the bench and read the paper and they talk about an article. And then Chip goes, Steve, get your shit off and you're in. And he would go in, he'd run up and down the court 6 times, shoot threes at both ends out of actions that he would get in the game. And then he would go back to the bench and they'd read the paper and they'd talk for 4 or 5 more minutes. And then he'd say, Steve, get up. And that's how they would train, exactly what his experience was like in the game. And it's reminded me of the novelty of the substitutions role. And rather than, again, sort of managing it in a way of like not making it a distraction, Steve Kerr's trainer just completely embraced it and said, if this is what it's going to be, then let's figure out how to simulate it and excel in it as much as we possibly can. He ended up playing 2 or 3 more years in the league because of it.
I mean, that is, again, I'm going to have to steal that example or find where you're reading about these, because that is a brilliant example of just player accountability, player owning it. Like I said earlier, is in like, I don't want to glamorize the role of a sub, but if you can work out to be a good sub, I know teams that would look at good subs to purchase for their team, so all of a sudden, are you then going to move to a better team because you're going to go and be a sub for them, and is that going to be the ticket to a potentially whole nother new contract, or could you financially incentivize it? And, that comes from that acceptance of the role. And like I said, I think that training method is brilliant. So we do something similar where we use probability to have a number of scenarios that what the game might look like. So we might be 2-0 up. we might be 2-0 down. We might have 10 men. We might have 11 men. We might be outpossessed. We might be outshot. And we just design what we call a playbook of the number of different scenarios. And this is from my sort of role, my opposition analysis, my going through the footage of 60 to 90 as opposed from 0 to 60, creating all these scenarios. And then on a match day -1, maybe we'll use clips on a game day or a match day -1 as well. But we bring those to life of going, this is what the game might look like for you. And so we're going to do a drill that's going to prepare you of what it's going to look like. I will always reinforce. I say, look, I'm not a magician. If I'm not, I can't read the future. If I was, I wouldn't be here. I'd be a millionaire somewhere else. But this is what we think the game might look like. Might be worth us just running through a few drills to understand how it's gonna affect us and that sort of thing.
Sammy, this has been great. I want to maybe share back what I've been learning today with you, and then see if I missed anything in what could be the subs coach. Because what I see a lot in my observations is I see a lot of coaches, the coaching staffs grow and grow and grow. And yet I don't always know that all coaches have a real clear role. And so I think some people might be like, well, I don't have money for a subs coach. It's like, well, you've got a lot of other coaches there. They don't seem to do anything other than just maybe enjoy the match, which is totally fine too. Obviously, if they've been putting all the work in season, or they actually become disruptive. You got too many people in a huddle of coaches just offering too many opinions, and it's a mess. So I've been kind of going, okay, what is the role of a subs coach? And like Nate mentioned, I think a lot of times people in the States might say, well, the subs coach is responsible for choosing when people go in and when they come out. Because if you look at volleyball, you look at American football, basketball, field hockey, lacrosse, ice hockey, I mean, there are so much rotations and substitutions. It's not like soccer or football where it's, coming on, or rugby, you kind of come on once. So there's a lot of different potentials in this. But so obviously one is decide when people would come in, but there's so much more. And so here's my list, and you could tell me if I missed anything. One is just to communicate when you might be coming on and when you might be coming off, and why you might be coming off. The other one is reflect. I think players come off, especially if they're going to go back on. Can we help them to say, well, okay, what's happening? What are you noticing? What could you improve the next time you go back on? They're supporting players emotionally with their regulation. And even the player that's upset, if they come off and they're not going back on. But for players that could potentially go back on, we could be helping to support them emotionally, regulate them, prepare them, as you said, whether you've been on or not. If you're going back on, you could prepare them physically, mentally. You've mentioned the word care multiple times, like just showing that we care about our athletes, having that personal connection. I would add celebrating them when they do well. And then also just where we started the conversation is just connecting back to mattering, helping them to see how their efforts, whether it's in practice, it's in the warm-ups, and it's potentially even in 5 minutes or 2 minutes, however many minutes they get, is that provided value and helped the team be successful. So there's a lot a subs coach could do, from my opinion. Did I miss anything?
No, that's build the union. But no, that's like a brilliant summarization, I suppose, of what I believe in, the methodology that I believe can make a difference. And yeah, it's nice hearing it back. And I suppose a nice way that I summarize it, and all of what you've said there does this, is that I think so many times in different sports and different teams, cultures, the subs are almost in the shadows. And I like working in the shadows. I like going into those shadows and turning the light on and seeing what we're working with and how we're doing it and that sort of thing. And the manager I was speaking to yesterday said he believes that players that are out of the lineup should actually be worked more and have more attention than players in it. And it was like really refreshing to hear that. And I think that's where that's what I pride myself on, is helping people achieve their goals, helping people get to where they want to be through all the methods that you just said, really. And I think it's a really nice way to summarize it.
Thanks so much for coming on here. We're going to link your book, Finishers, which is how I first heard of you, in the details this episode. You've mentioned like the Finishers Academy, things like that. You've also mentioned off air about some of your new research around referees, which is going to be interesting. We're going to probably have to bring you back on for that. But for those that want to maybe connect with you, reach out, where should they go?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best tool that I use. I think it's just brilliant. I think you can connect with anybody and everybody, from the highest people in decision makers in the club to the lowest. So I'm always on LinkedIn, probably too busy on LinkedIn if you ask some people. but that's probably the best place. And then I'm on Instagram. I use it a little bit, but I'm not huge on it. And then I can drop my email as well if anyone's sort of got any follow-up questions. But welcome all questions. And like I said, a big thank you to you both. I'm a big fan of being able to have conversations with particularly with other sports and learn and see what you guys are doing. So it's brilliant to hear and share experiences. So just as sort of grateful for the opportunity as well. So thank you.
All right, that's it for our conversation with Sammy Lander. Check out his book, Finishers, and check out the Finishers Academy. Links are in the details of this episode as well as the notes to this podcast. One of my favorite lines was that Sammy said was, "I'm not here to make you feel good about being a sub. I'm here to make you feel like you've got all the tools necessary so that when that moment comes, you can do what you need to do." I think that's so important. And I think when you do help them feel equipped and feel supported, then I think they will feel more valued. They will feel like they matter, that they don't just belong. Thank you again for listening in to today's podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with some people that found it valuable. If you're a head coach, you're going, "My gosh, I don't have time to do all this stuff." Absolutely understand that. Share with your assistants. Give your assistants one of the roles to really focus on the subs. I think it's a huge way to empower your assistants as well. Thanks again for listening in to the Coaching Culture Podcast.